This viewer asked how he could practice meekness towards another when the other person has most definitely grievously wronged me. Says, I find the practice of meekness in the face of such injustice to be the hardest thing in life.
It is hard, right? It is very, very hard. It's hard to be silent when somebody cuts us off in traffic, when somebody gets in front of us in line. For either men or women, it's still hard when people do things like that. But what you're talking about here sounds as though you've suffered more than merely being cut off in traffic or cut off in line. Talking about a grievous harm. And yet, what our Lord is asking you to do is to forgive so that you may be forgiven. Of course, insofar as what people have done to you is sinful and therefore offensive to God, you can be unhappy about that, certainly, as our Lord himself was about the Father being, offended. But you look at the example of our Lord, and he makes it very clear: if you want to be forgiven, you have to forgive. And if you are grateful for our Lord having forgiven you, we'll show that gratitude by being willing to forgive others, right? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And so I'd say this person who's writing this has an excellent opportunity. The person can be moved to seek revenge, right? But everyone loses with that, and he himself would lose the most. This person can stew about it and fret about it, but again, that's like drinking the poison in the hopes that somebody else will die. It doesn't help, right? But this person has a wonderful opportunity insofar as if this person has actually suffered some serious wrong, it's not against the law of Christ for him to seek redress, to try to set the record straight and try to make things right. That's not wrong. But at the same time, even as he does that, he cannot be moved by malice. He cannot be moved by malice against that other person. To the extent that he's moved by malice against the other person, to that extent he's committing sin. So I would just advise him, okay, if you have nothing to gain by pursuing this with the other person, even if you have no way to make things right with them, please don't harbor an animosity toward them. Pray for them, as our Lord would have you do, as he prayed for you from the cross. You have actually an opportunity here to spiritually gain an enormous victory. And that's an enormous victory over yourself for our Lord himself. That if you can, out of love for our Lord, find it in you, the grace of God, to sincerely forgive this person from your heart. It doesn't mean you just accept it as perfectly fine. I'm not saying that, okay? But that you do not have malice toward this person, and you want this person to save his soul. So you have a certain charitable, which is a divine love for that person. That will gain for you so many graces from God and such forgiveness. If that's the measure of your forgiveness, that'll be the measure of God's forgiveness. Manifold times, right? So sometimes we forget that when we are put in a position of forgiving others who have injured us and not carrying malice toward them or even hatred, if we can, by the grace of God, succeed in doing that, in forgiving them and not having that malice toward them, that this is like opening the floodgates of God's forgiveness to ourselves. And what is that worth? Infinitely worth more than anything anybody else on earth has cost us to open up the floodgates of God's mercy by simply being merciful. So I say it's a great opportunity. I say this without knowing what great harm the other person has experienced, but nonetheless, I just say that they have an opportunity to gain a great spiritual value, a victory here, and maybe this is the supreme test of their life right now as to what our Lord wants of them. The question is, is this what our Lord wants of them? And are they willing to do it for him? That's the only question right now. Are they willing to give it to him?